Hello, I'm Brigantia, Blackbird of Blackbird's Brew. Happy Sunday. It's time for this week's Loki video, and we're going to be examining what we can learn from his modern-day devotees. Now, when Loki first came to me, he made it very, very plain that whether or not I would or should accept him wasn't something I was going to be able to determine by reading mythology, judging him by his reputation, or by listening to the opinions of others, be those opinions favorable or unfavorable. He said it was going to come down to trust, and the only thing that mattered was whether or not I trusted him. And that question couldn't be answered by my mind alone. The answer was in my heart, and it would be supported by my instincts. And this put me into quite a tailspin for quite a while. Not because I couldn't see my way to an answer, but because the moment he said this to me, I knew the answer, and I just was not ready to accept it for a variety of reasons. But straight out the gate, Loki was revealing uncomfortable truths that I needed to see. So once I overcame this initial hurdle, that's when he began to encourage me to, okay, now you need to re-examine mythology. You have fresh eyes. And then from that point, he said, and go ahead and investigate what some of his present-day followers have to say for themselves and about their relationship with him. So the common thread that I found had to do with shadow work. Most everyone who I was either watching their videos or I was reading blog posts that they wrote, they talked about how they needed change in their lives, and sometimes in small ways, sometimes in very significant ways. But everyone, even those who were still kind of tiptoeing around Loki, they acknowledged that Loki opened their eyes to changes that they needed to make, and that if it hadn't been for his influence, they might never have allowed themselves to see it. He didn't let them evade the issue or pretend that they couldn't see it. And sometimes just acknowledging that you do have a problem or that something in your life isn't working is half the battle right there. And our comfort zones, they can become excuses for stagnation. So when Loki is pushing us about something, it's really about sparking growth and change and becoming more whole as an individual. Another common thing that people would talk about is that there was a need to dispense with self-deception. Loki wasn't having it, and it's easy to see why he prioritizes this particular issue. None of us can go forward if we're still fooling ourselves into thinking that everything's fine, la-di-da, particularly if this advances to the point where it is actually cognitive dissonance. That's when we can't even see reality, even when confronted with facts, let alone face it. So a lot of the chaos and the disruption Loki is seen as bringing into people's lives, it seems to be more of a consequence of him making people see the truth about themselves, their lives, their actions, than it is about him actively doing something unpleasant to throw that person's life out of whack. Their lives were already out of balance, and they were ignoring it or pretending that it wasn't. Loki just pointed out the imbalance, and he didn't accommodate their illusions. So was he bringing chaos by forcing people to acknowledge reality, or did he simply reveal the chaos that was of their own making? The third theme that really comes into play is dealing with your baggage. None of us are particularly good at dealing with things what we are genuinely uncomfortable with, whether this is our emotions or thoughts or instincts or words, actions, events, or personal failures. If we don't like something or we feel ashamed about something or we're struggling emotionally in some other way, it's not uncommon for us to develop less than helpful coping strategies, like trying to ignore things until they go away, because that always works. Not. Suppression, or in very extreme circumstances, actual psychological disassociation. And then Loki comes along, and not only does he just open up that closet door that we hid all our baggage in, but he's emptying out that closet. He's dancing with any resident skeletons we've got back there, and then he just examines everything, spreads it out, and then he sits you down to discuss it all. And what people have said is that you can't outrun this process, you can't hide from it, you can't shut it down or block it all out. He will keep bringing this up until you deal with the baggage and you learn how to let go of what you need to, and then put things back in their proper place and allow yourself to move forward. Now, obviously, this is a process that's going to be quite upsetting, and it does require delving into emotionally uncomfortable territory. But it's done for a purpose, to heal and to become whole and to stop being your own worst enemy. Now I'd like to point out another thing that I noticed amongst these people who've worked with Loki is that there does seem to be a difference of approach, and what issue that they're dealing with seemed to affect how Loki was teaching them. And one of the strongest impressions I've come away with after listening and reading about people's experiences is that he is constantly tailoring his approach as he finds them, then as they evolve, and as he wants to guide them. Not everyone I was looking at was dealing with the same issues. And when they talked about things that he helped them with, they also made it kind of clear that his way of addressing it varied. And this was even seen in the kinds of offerings that he wanted from specific individuals, or colors, or incense, crystals, or other representations he preferred on the altar. It was more about his relationship with that particular person than just his, standard issue preferences for himself. All this tells me that he's going to speak in a voice that people are able to hear and that people are willing to hear. And depending on that person's reaction and to him and to work at hand, his approach will change. And I think he's less worried about what method he uses when reaching people, and a lot more concerned with, was this method effective and did it get the point across? He seems to take temperament and people's life stages into account. There was a wide range of personalities that I saw in the videos and articles. Everyone reacted to Loki in slightly different ways. These were people who lived in different localities. They were different ages. They had different professions, different family obligations, and Loki took all of that into consideration for them. This shows in the way that people described how they got to know him, how that relationship developed, and the ways that Loki would give them a little push when needed. He doesn't have a standard issue method of pushing. He's looking at the psychology of the individual. He's looking for their buttons to get them to move forward when they're starting to backtrack or when they're just not wanting to go forward. This is quite unlike other gods that have, a more or less pretty straightforward approach and straightforward requirements for the people that they work with, what offerings they accept, and the general parameters of the relationships. But Loki is a lot more adaptable, and it's as if he's leading the way for the person he's dealing with to learn how to adapt and change in beneficial ways, and he's demonstrating that by the ways in which he's working with them. Now, as he is working with people, I did get the idea that a lot of things ended up being blessings in disguise. The misfortunes that people sometimes experience while working with Loki, they do quickly evolve into, oh, well, because this happened, now I have that, and things are so much better now. And even in the case of very dramatic changes, failed relationships, job loss, facing deep trauma, this caused stress, emotional uproar, sometimes even people hitting rock bottom. There was one lady who used that specific phrase in her video, but it all turned out for the best. Because sometimes things have to go completely sideways before we can see that a relationship or a job or carrying our baggage around is not in our best interest, and it's going to end in disaster, or at least end badly, regardless. And we just couldn't see it before. We couldn't see it until Loki came along, sped events up, and we got to see the end results kind of ahead of schedule, and then we're dealing with the aftermath and saying, oh wow, this was always going to end up here. This was always going to lead to things that weren't good for me. Now, our brains have a way of blinding us if we're determined to maintain the status quo. We rationalize, we make excuses, and even as the situation deteriorates, we still pretend that things are okay, and we just keep slogging along even though it's, leaving more and more of a mark, and it's wearing us down, and it's just breaking our spirits. Loki interrupts that process. He makes us see what's what, and thank goodness for that. And we might struggle with it at first. We might be resentful because our illusions are being shattered. But after that, our minds are open enough that we can see that this was all necessary and we weren't exactly responding to previous hints. So if it all crashes down like the tower in the tarot, but at least at that point we've broken out of the pattern. And as, we clear away the rubble, and we are able to start thinking clearly again, we can see that it was actually the best thing that could have happened. We were not doing anything to help ourselves, and Loki was benevolent enough to get us into a situation to where we could see that we were engaged in self-sabotage, and now we are in a position to make better choices. So the question becomes, is Loki dangerous? Is he evil? Is he mean-spirited? Let's deal with the dangerous first. And I want to make this absolutely crystal clear. All of the gods are dangerous. Anyone who has power is dangerous, whether it is a power of divinity, the power of magic that various practitioners use, or someone who has political power or economic power or has great physical strength. Anyone who has a form of power is and can be dangerous under the right conditions. Now, when it comes to the gods, even the sweetest, most even-tempered and kind-spirited deity out there is still a deity. That deity is massively more powerful than we are or ever could be. If they wanted to, of course a deity could do us harm. Loki's no exception. He is extraordinarily powerful. But the same could be said of the goddess Bridget, who is famed for being very easy to work with, and I've never seen an account or heard of an experience in which she did anyone ill, but it doesn't change the fact that she has the capacity to do so. It's about character, and it's about understanding who they are, what their areas of concerns are, and what your relationship is with them. And of course, there's us, our side of the equation. And one of the keys to deity work is about being properly respectful. We are not entitled to their attention. We're not entitled to their help. They are not at our command. When they help us, when they show up for us in any form, that is a gift that they are choosing to give out of the goodness of their hearts. So if we do establish a relationship with deity, and if that deity decides to become a patron, I think it's even more likely that our attitude towards them will become more respectful, more reverential. Even if the overall relationship is relaxed and in a very comfortable place, you also don't forget the status of who it is you're talking to. And given the disrespect to Loki experiences in the lore and in the sagas, and also the disrespect he has experienced from many modern-day heathens, it seems even more important to make sure that we give Loki his due if he is choosing to work with us. Now, on the topic of evil, would someone who was evil concern himself with improving people's lives and overall well-being? Even the people who were the most begrudging in their dealings with Loki will acknowledge that he has a vital role within Norse mythology, and his chaotic energy is an energy that promotes change, and sometimes change is absolutely what that person needs. Even if it does leave them scattered in the moment, ultimately it goes to their good. Now, even though Loki will point out the truth, and he won't let us get away with ignoring it, when the emotional fallout comes, there are many accounts in which people say that he came in at that moment, he was providing support, he helped them ride out the storm. This isn't the action of a deity who enjoys seeing people in pain. This is someone who's trying to help people deal with that pain that's already weighing them down and holding them back and saying, you're going to be okay. As awful as it was to face this horrible thing, you are still going to be okay. I am still here. You have my strength to lean on at your disposal as you go through this transition and this transformation. So that doesn't say evil to me. And people have also said in various ways that Loki teaches that the only constant in life is change. And I find that to be very true. Life doesn't stand still. It doesn't stagnate. It's a constant process of evolution, and that means change. Teaching people how to cope with change is a kindness, not a punishment. Another lesson that got repeated by people who work with Loki, it can be summed up with the old expression, to thine own self be true. Loki doesn't fit into a box, and in all honesty, neither do we. We are individuals with quirks and foibles, and embracing the totality of our being is something Loki wants us to do for the sake of having a measure of inner peace, a sense of personal integrity, but also for the sake of our sanity. When we decide to do something, it should be because we decided it, not because we're following societal programming and we're conforming for the sake of conformity. Now, it is true that he has knocked many a person off their pedestal, but that isn't meanness. It's about humility. So when the time comes and Loki decides that someone needs to be removed from their high horse because he deems that the appropriate action, let's not forget he is a god. With godhood comes authority, especially when it involves his areas of concern and the people with whom he is working. If he decides we need to learn humility, the issue is not him being mean to us. The issue is that we needed an attitude adjustment, and the sooner we come to grips with that, the better. We live in an era in which great emphasis is placed on protecting self-image, whether or not that self-image bears any resemblance to reality. Loki is a destroyer of illusions, and yes, that may very well hurt our feelings. But our illusions will never improve our lives. It won't teach us personal responsibility, and it will not give us motivation to improve for the better. So the phrase tough love comes up frequently in Loki videos. And it isn't because he can't be gentle. Sometimes he is. But sometimes we don't respond to a softer approach, and so he becomes firm. I mean, with me, from my own experience, he drew a very hard line in the sand right from the very beginning. And I'm the better off for it. And honestly, the more obstinate someone is, the more likely it is that Loki will take a tough love approach. But it doesn't mean that he doesn't care or that he's lost patience. He's just trying to break through our denial and our stubbornness. Now, in the description box below, I have a list of videos that I've watched and websites I've visited in which people have discussed what it's like and what they've learned by working with Loki. These are not the only sources I've consulted over the past few weeks. But they are sources that I've looked at more than once. So if you think Loki may be reaching out to you, or there's a possibility that he is, or if you're just curious about the day in, day out work of having Loki in your life, then these are additional points of view that you can investigate for yourself. Now for me, I can't say that Loki has decided to be my patron. It's still very early days for that. But I do know that he is in my life now, and for the foreseeable future. I intend to make the most of this experience, whether he's come into my life just to serve a specific purpose, or if he's decided to be in the picture for the long haul. This is all meaningful work, it's all helpful, and it's making me a better witch and a better human being. So, if you've worked with Loki or this is a subject that you would like to discuss, please come visit me on Discord and the server Blackbird's Brew. There will be a link also in the description box below where you can join us. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel and like this video and leave any comments that you would care to share. But for now, I will see you later. Bye.